On November 16, 2025, what started as just another morning off the Senkaku Islands turned into a geopolitical flashpoint. 4 armed China Coast Guard ships crossed into Japanese waters and stayed, daring Japan to respond. This was not an accident. For the 25th time this year, Japan faced an incursion, this time after Tokyo declared its vital interests over Taiwan. So how did both sides react, and why could this single standoff redefine who controls these disputed seas? At 9:23 Japan Standard Time, automated tracking systems flagged 4 China Coast Guard vessels breaching the 12 nautical mile limit east of the Senkaku Islands. Each ship's MMSI identifier, routinely logged by Spire's AIS file JP1611, confirmed their presence inside Japanese territorial waters. Deck-mounted guns were visible as the convoy advanced in formation, holding course despite the warnings broadcast over VHF Channel 16. The Japan Coast Guard's lead patrol, callsign JS1123, issued a clear message. "You are entering Japanese territorial waters. Leave immediately." Minutes ticked by. The Chinese ships ignored repeated calls, maintaining slow patrol speed as they shadowed Japanese fishing boats near Wotsuri Island. Japan Coast Guard crews, trained for restraint, kept their vessels positioned between the intruders and civilian craft, documenting every maneuver with radar logs and time-stamped video. At 10:07, a tense exchange crackled across the radio. The Japan Coast Guard's bridge audio captured the Chinese reply. "This is China Coast Guard. We are conducting routine law enforcement." For over 2 hours, Japanese and Chinese ships circled in a high-stakes standoff. Retired Captain Sato, reviewing the incident playback, pointed to the AIS track, 4 red blips inside the territorial ring from 9:23 to 11:27. The data left no doubt. Only after the Japan Coast Guard deployed its largest cutters to block their path did the Chinese vessels finally alter course. By 11:27, all 4 had crossed back into disputed waters, trailed by Japanese ships and a digital record of every move. The evidence and timestamps, audio, and vessel logs stood as a silent witness to what happened that morning. Chief Cabinet Secretary Kihara stepped before the press in Tokyo just after noon. His statement was brief, but the language left no room for doubt. "Japan has lodged a stern protest through diplomatic channels," he said, reading from a prepared text. The official record time stamped his remarks at 12:36 p.m. The government's position was clear. The morning's incursion was, in Kihara's words, a violation of international law and absolutely unacceptable. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs delivered the protest directly to China's embassy in Tokyo, citing the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and Japan's administrative control over the Senkaku Islands. Beijing's response came swiftly. Within hours, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning addressed reporters in Beijing. Her words echoed a familiar refrain. "The patrol by the China Coast Guard in China's territorial waters is utterly legitimate and justified. Diaoyu and its affiliated islands are China's inherent territory." The official press release, issued at 3:10 p.m. Beijing time, rejected Japan's protest outright and demanded Tokyo stop all illegal encroachments. The contrast could hardly have been sharper. Japan framed the event as an infringement, illegal, provocative, and documented with incident logs and international law. China, by contrast, described the patrol as routine enforcement within its own territory, invoking historical claims and legal statutes from its own perspective. Each side's statement, delivered in clipped official language and published within hours of the incident, transformed the morning standoff from a maritime encounter into a formal diplomatic dispute. The evidence gathered on the water was now fuel for a clash of official narratives, each government standing firm behind its chosen words. Crossing the 12 nautical mile limit around the Senkaku Islands is not just a symbolic act. It triggers the core of international maritime law. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, every coastal state exercises full sovereignty over its territorial sea, defined as extending up to 12 nautical miles from the baseline. Within this boundary, the state has the right to enforce its laws, regulate passage, and exclude unauthorized foreign vessels. Professor Ayako Tanaka, a leading authority on maritime law, reads from Article 2, "The sovereignty of a coastal state extends beyond its land territory and internal waters to an adjacent belt of sea sea described as the territorial sea. The language leaves little doubt. Sovereignty here is not a matter of opinion, but of codified international law. Article 19 adds a critical detail. Foreign ships may only pass through these waters if their passage is innocent and does not threaten the peace or security of the coastal state. Armed Coast Guard vessels operating without prior notification or consent rarely meet that standard. The legal roots of Japan's claim run deep. In 1972, the United States returned administrative control of the Senkaku Islands to Japan under the Okinawa Reversion Agreement, drawing the territorial sea boundary in accordance with UNCLOS. Decades later, in 2012, Japan's government spent 2.05 billion yen to nationalize several of the islands, an act intended to reinforce administrative control and clarify ownership. Each of these steps established a legal and practical basis for Japan's enforcement actions whenever foreign vessels crossed the 12 nautical mile threshold. The law, the treaties, and the administrative record formed the backbone of Japan's position long before politics or diplomacy come into play. 9 days before the incursion, Prime Minister Sane Takaichi stood in Japan's parliament and delivered a message that would echo across the East China Sea. A Chinese attack on Taiwan could constitute an existential crisis for Japan, she declared, and she refused to walk back her words even after Beijing's immediate backlash. Security scholar Dr. Kenji Matsuo later described the statement as the clearest linkage yet between Japan's security and Taiwan's fate. The timing was not lost on anyone tracking the region. Within those 9 days, Chinese Coast Guard vessels crossed into Japan's claimed waters around the Senkaku Islands for the 25th time that year, a record unmatched in previous years and a stark jump from the single-digit annual totals before 2020. Incident logs reveal a deliberate rhythm, each entry coming in the wake of high-profile Japanese statements or policy moves, as if calibrated to apply pressure at moments of maximum visibility. Parliamentary transcripts and Coast Guard data together paint a pattern. Beijing's patrols intensify when Tokyo signals a firmer stance on Taiwan or the islands themselves. For Japanese officials, the message is clear. Every word uttered in Tokyo's diet chamber now carries operational consequences on the water. China's 2021 Coast Guard law changed the rules of engagement in these waters. For the first time, Chinese crews received explicit authority to use force, including lethal weapons, against foreign vessels deemed to threaten what Beijing calls its sovereignty. The law's language is unambiguous. Coast Guard officers may take all necessary measures, and their ships now routinely carry 76mm cannons, heavy machine guns, and water cannons. Some of these vessels displace more than 10,000 tons, making them larger than many naval destroyers. Patrols near the Senkaku Islands are no longer symbolic. They arrive armed and ready for escalation. Japan's Coast Guard operates under a different mandate. Standard operating procedures emphasize restraint, even under pressure. When foreign ships cross the 12 nautical mile line, Japan Coast Guard crews follow a strict sequence. They detect, warned by VHF radio on channel 16, shadow at a safe distance, and record every move with radar and video. Lethal force is authorized only if lives are in immediate danger. The aim is to defuse, not provoke. But when Chinese officers are empowered to escalate and Japanese crews are trained to hold back, every encounter at sea carries the risk of sudden violence. The rules are clear on paper, but on the water they collide. In the harbors of Okinawa, the anxiety is measured not in headlines, but in empty nets. Veteran fisher Hiroshi Tamashiro counts the cost of each patrol. He has lost nearly 30% of his annual catch since regular Chinese intrusions began. Boats now steer wide of Watsuri's rich grounds, not for lack of fish, but for fear of another close encounter. The risk of escalation is more than a distant political calculation. It is a daily reality for families whose livelihoods depend on these waters. Across the Pacific, the U.S. State Department moved quickly after the November 16th incident, issuing a statement that reaffirmed the American treaty commitment to Japan's security, including the Senkaku Islands. Ambassador Glass called China's actions a test of alliance resolve and warned against attempts at economic coercion. Analysts have mapped out the probabilities. The most likely scenario, at 60%, is continued gray zone competition, intrusions, shadowing, and diplomatic friction without open conflict. Yet the odds of a tactical escalation, a collision, or accidental weapon discharge stand at 1 in 4. A smaller but real risk remains for a strategic lurch, with both sides forced into decisions that could change the region's future. For now, the balance holds, but every incursion redraws the lines of risk for those who call these islands home. Tensions in the East China Sea now shape regional security, with over 24 incursions this year alone. As patrols escalate, every maneuver risks sparking a wider conflict. The line between provocation and confrontation grows thinner, and the world watches what happens next. Share your thoughts below.